I'm the owner now. She's screaming it in 911. The HOA president, standing on my porch at my Lakeside cabin, telling the cops I'm trespassing. I just got back from visiting my daughter, and my key won't turn. She changed the locks. I've owned this place for 30 years. 30 years. And she's got paperwork saying it's hers now. The deputy arrives, looks at her documents, looks at me, and says, "Sir, you need to leave. I'm being kicked out of my own home while my neighbors watch and do nothing." Have you ever been so angry you couldn't even speak? Because I'm there right now. My truck rolled up the gravel driveway like it had 1,000 times before. Late September afternoon, leaves turning gold. That perfect mountain air that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. I've been gone 2 weeks visiting my daughter Sophia down in Portland, celebrating her nursing graduation. The cabin looked exactly how I'd left it. Shutters closed, firewood stacked on the porch. I grabbed my duffel from the passenger seat, walked up those familiar wooden steps, and dug my key from my pocket. Slid it into the lock, turned it. Nothing. The key wouldn't catch. I pulled it out, checked it, tried again. Still nothing. And that's when I heard her voice behind me, calm and cold as winter. "You can stop trying, John. That lock's been changed." I turn around, and there she was, Elizabeth Grant, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, standing on my porch with her arms crossed, and this smile that wasn't really a smile at all. It was the look of someone who had been planning this moment for weeks, maybe months, and was finally getting to watch it play out. I said, "Elizabeth, what are you talking about? This is my cabin." She pulled a folded document from her back pocket and held it up like it was a trophy. "Was your cabin," she said, "per bylaw 14.2, failure to maintain assessment payments results in forfeiture of property. You were notified by a certified mail. You didn't respond. So, as of September 1st, this property reverted to HOA ownership. I have the deed right here." My stomach dropped. I never got any certified mail. I've paid every assessment on time for 30 years. She shrugged. And I swear to you, she actually shrugged like this was just some minor inconvenience. "Not my problem if you don't check your mail," she said. "The process was followed correctly. You had 30 days to appeal. You didn't. So now this cabin belongs to the association. And as president, I'm authorized to take possession." I felt my hand shake. 30 years. I built half this cabin myself back in '92. My wife Laura and I spent every summer here before she passed. Sophia learned to swim in that lake. And this woman was standing here telling me it wasn't mine anymore because of some bylaw I'd never even heard of. I pulled out my phone, tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm calling my lawyer," I said. Elizabeth's smile got wider. "Go ahead. But right now, you're trespassing on HOA property, so either you leave voluntarily or I call the sheriff." I stared at her. "You're serious?" She pulled her phone out and started dialing. "Sheriff's Department. Yes. I need to report a man trying to break into my property. 347 Lakeview Drive. He's refusing to leave." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was calling 911 on me at my cabin. The operator's voice came through faintly, asking for details, and Elizabeth looked right at me while she answered. "Yes, he's still here. No, I don't know him. I'm the owner now. The legal owner. He needs to be removed immediately. I'm the owner now." Those 4 words hit me like a punch. A neighbor across the street, a guy I'd waved to 100 times, was watching from his driveway. Phone out, recording, not helping, not even looking concerned, just watching this play out like it was a show. Within 10 minutes, a deputy sheriff rolled up, lights flashing. He was polite enough to ask both of us for identification and documentation. I showed him my original deed from '92, clear as day, my name on it. Elizabeth showed him her document, and, I'm not gonna lie, it looked official. County seal, notary signature, the whole thing. The deputy studied both for a long minute, then said what I was dreading. "This is a civil property dispute. I can't make a determination here. You'll need to file a motion with the court. But, ma'am, since you're presenting documentation of current ownership, I'm going to have to ask sir to leave the property." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab that fake deed and rip it in half. But the deputy's hand was resting on his belt, and I knew if I pushed this, I'd be the one in handcuffs. So I walked back to my truck, feeling Elizabeth's eyes on my back the whole way, feeling that neighbors still recording, feeling like I just lost everything and nobody cared. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, trying to breathe, trying to think. Then I noticed something on the porch. 3 cardboard boxes neatly labeled in Elizabeth's handwriting. Removed per bylaw 14.2. My belongings. She'd already gone through my cabin and packed my stuff like I was being evicted from an apartment. I got out, grabbed the boxes, and loaded them into the truck bed. The deputy watched to make sure I didn't cause trouble. When I picked up the last box, something fell out of my jacket pocket. A red USB drive. I'd never seen it before. Someone had put it there. I picked it up, turned it over. There was a label handwritten, PRC 4PB password ? I sat back in the truck and plugged the USB into my laptop. The password prompt came up immediately. I tried Laura, my wife's name. Incorrect. Tried Sophia. Incorrect. Tried Pine Ridge. Incorrect. A message flashed. 2 attempts remaining. Device will lock after 5 failed attempts. I stared at the screen. Someone had planted this. Someone who knew Elizabeth would try something. Someone who had access to my cabin while she controlled it. By 9 p.m., I was sitting in a diner booth across from Reynolds, the property lawyer Mike had recommended. I explained everything, showed him the forged deed, and told him about the USB. Reynolds studied the document under the table lamp, ran his finger along the notary's seal, and held it up to the light. This deed's fake, he said flatly. I can see 3 problems with it just sitting here. We'll get a forensic document examiner and file an emergency temporary restraining order on Monday morning. You'll have your cabin back within days. This is textbook fraud. I pulled out my credit card and slid it across the table. File it, I said. Whatever it costs. Reynolds nodded, pocketed the card, and said he'd have papers ready by Monday at 8 a.m. I drove back to Mike's place where I'd be staying, pulled out that red USB drive again, and stared at it in the dark. What are you waiting for me to figure out? I thought. And who are you? Monday morning, Reynolds filed the emergency TRO with the circuit court. He also hired Dr. Ellis, a forensic document examiner who'd testified in 60-plus fraud cases, to analyze Elizabeth's deed. I maxed out 2 credit cards to cover the retainer fees. That afternoon, a FedEx envelope arrived at Mike's house addressed to me. Inside was a demand letter from Elizabeth's attorney, some guy named Victor Lang, who practiced out of a strip mall office 2 towns over. The letter claimed I owed the HOA $2,875 in back assessments, administrative fees, and property recovery costs. Attached were 3 invoices, all dated within the last month. All listing services I'd never requested. Landscaping I never authorized. A roof inspection I never agreed to. Urgent structural consultation that never happened. The letter threatened collections, a lien on my personal assets, and a cease and desist if I continued harassing HOA leadership. I called Reynolds. He laughed. Intimidation tactic, he said. The next morning, a county building inspector showed up at the cabin. I'd driven by to check on it, saw his truck in the driveway, and walked up to ask what was going on. He had a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a deeply bored expression. Anonymous complaint about unpermitted structures, he said. Need to inspect the entire property. I watched him spend 3 hours measuring every corner of the cabin, checking foundation depth, examining the electrical panel, and photographing the deck supports. He found absolutely nothing wrong. Everything was permitted. Everything was up to code. Everything had been inspected back in '92 when I built the addition. But that wasn't the point, was it? The point was to waste my time, to make me stand there for 3 hours while he went through the motions. To send a message. This is what happens when you fight back. Thursday afternoon, Reynolds called. Got Dr. Ellis's report. It's definitive. 3 clear indicators of forgery. I met him at his office, and he spread the report across his desk like he was revealing buried treasure. Dr. Ellis had found that the notary's signature on Elizabeth's deed didn't match any registered notary in the state database. The paper stock was from 2018, but the document was dated 2025, and the aging didn't match. And the embossed county seal wasn't embossed at all. It was a high-resolution photocopy. You could only tell under magnification, but there was no 3-dimensional deformation. It was completely flat. This is slam-dunk fraud, Reynolds said. Ellis will testify under oath. The judge is going to tear this apart. The copies Elizabeth filed had 2 tiny pencil ticks in the upper right margin. The same slanted dashes Susan left on meeting minutes when she proofed them. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe not. I filed it away. The hearing was scheduled for Monday, 8 a.m. I wore the only suit I owned and sat in the courtroom gallery while Reynolds presented our motion. Elizabeth showed up with Victor Lang. Both of them looking confident like this was just a formality they had to endure before moving on with their day. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Holland, and she didn't waste time. She took Dr. Ellis's report, studied it in complete silence for 5 minutes. You could hear people breathing. Then she looked up at Elizabeth. Elizabeth blinked, glanced at Victor, then back at the judge. Your Honor, this must be a clerical error from a previous board administration. We inherited many disorganized files when I took over as president. Judge Holland stared at her for a long moment. Convenient, she said. Mr. Harlan has presented his original 1992 deed, which shows a clear chain of title. You've presented a document that 3 forensic tests indicate is fraudulent. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. Mrs. Grant, you are to vacate the property within 24 hours and return all keys and access codes to Mr. Harlan. Any violation will result in contempt charges. We'll schedule a full hearing on the fraud allegations within 30 days. Elizabeth's face went white. Victor started to say something, but Judge Holland cut him off. This hearing is concluded. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I could breathe for the first time in 2 weeks. I glanced back and saw a man in the audience, an older guy, maybe 60, wearing a Pine Ridge polo shirt. He was watching Elizabeth with this troubled expression like he just realized something he didn't want to know. 24 hours later, a sheriff's deputy supervised while Elizabeth removed her personal items from my cabin. I stood in the driveway, watching her carry boxes to her car, not saying a word. When she was gone, I walked inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The furniture, the photos on the wall, even a coffee mug I'd left in the sink before driving to Portland. It was like she'd been living in my space, but was too afraid to actually touch anything, knowing this moment might come. I locked the door behind me, sat on the couch, and just breathed. I'd won. Legally, officially, I'd won. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was over. That evening, I was checking my email when a notification popped up. Someone had posted about me on the neighborhood discussion board. Concern about property maintenance at 347 Lakeview Drive. The owner has a history of disputes with HOA leadership. Recommend increased monitoring. I scrolled through the comments. 18 people I'd never met, all posted within the last hour, all agreeing that my property was problematic and lowering neighborhood standards. I stared at my phone. I'd won in court. I had my cabin back. The judge had called her deed fraudulent. So, what was Elizabeth planning now? What was the next move? Because women like Elizabeth Grant don't just give up when a judge rules against them. They adapt. They find another angle. They keep fighting until they have destroyed you or you've destroyed them. And I had a sinking feeling that this legal victory was just round one. Mike texted me at about 9:30 on a Saturday morning. Elizabeth at Java Station. Bring your camera. I parked across the street and eased up to the window. Through the glass, I caught maybe 10 seconds, her voice sharp and clipped. A teenage barista shrinking behind the register. The room going suddenly still like someone had pulled the plug on the air. No theatrics, no speech from me, just her finger jabbing the counter and the way everyone else froze with their cups halfway up. I filmed that sliver and posted it with 4 words, "Your HOA president. B. Why dinner?" The clip had split the neighborhood clean in half. Old friends sent careful texts. Strangers wrote me essays. I didn't pump the views or argue in the comments. I just watched who rushed to excuse it as a bad day and who finally said enough. The views weren't the point. The map of loyalties was. 3 days later, I got an email from someone named Jennifer Wu, claiming to be a reporter from the Pine Ridge Gazette, requesting an interview about ongoing HOA disputes and their impact on community cohesion. It sounded legitimate, professional tone, detailed questions, and even a headshot photo attached. But something fell off. I forwarded it to Mike, who spent 5 minutes on a search engine and called me back laughing. "There's no Jennifer Wu at the Gazette," he said. I called the main desk. They've never heard of her. I checked the email again. The domain looked right, but when I hovered over the sender's address, the actual email was from a free web service. It was Elizabeth. She was trying to bait me into saying something she could use against me, maybe record me without my knowledge, twist my words into something actionable. I deleted the email and didn't respond. That Sunday, the HOA newsletter arrived in my mailbox. Elizabeth had a monthly column where she talked about community standards and share values. And this month's edition was titled, "When Court Interference Undermines Community Standards." I read it standing at my mailbox, feeling my blood pressure rise with every sentence. She didn't mention me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. When individual property owners use legal technicalities to circumvent established community processes, she wrote, it creates a dangerous precedent that threatens the stability and property values of all residents. Courts are not equipped to understand the nuanced needs of HOA governance. Judges make decisions based on narrow legal definitions, not on what's best for the community as a whole. She went on for 3 paragraphs, painting herself as a defender of order and me as some kind of entitled rebel who thought rules didn't apply to him. The comments on the online version were even more divided than before. Then on Tuesday, an envelope showed up in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a printed photograph of me and Sophia at her nursing graduation. Both of us smiling outside the hospital where she'd just been hired. Below the photo was a typewritten note. "Your daughter has a bright future. Hospital background checks are very thorough. It would be unfortunate if anything complicated her career before it even starts." My hand started shaking. I read it 3 times, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding, but there was no other way to interpret it. Elizabeth was threatening Sophia, my daughter, who had nothing to do with any of this, who didn't even live in Pine Ridge, who was just starting her life. I wanted to drive straight to Elizabeth's house and confront her, but I knew that's exactly what she wanted. She wanted me to lose control, to do something stupid, to give her ammunition for a restraining order or an assault charge. I called Reynolds. "Can I report this?" I asked. He sighed. "You can try, but there's no explicit threat in the language. It would be unfortunate isn't the same as I will make sure. Any lawyer would argue it's a general observation, not a threat. Police won't do anything." I hung up, stared at the photo, and made a decision. I wasn't going to tell Sophia yet. She didn't need this stress during her first month at a new job. But I also wasn't going to let Elizabeth win by intimidation. I looked at my calendar. The HOA had 5 board members. Elizabeth was president. There was the vice president, Diane Fletcher, who had been on the board for 15 years and generally went along with whatever Elizabeth wanted. The secretary, a woman named Susan, whom I'd heard was planning to resign for health reasons. The treasurer was an older guy named Robert Klein who mostly stayed quiet, and one at-large member who rarely showed up to meetings. If Susan resigned, there would be an election to fill her seat. And if I ran for that seat, I could challenge Elizabeth from the inside. Mike thought I was crazy. "You're going to run for the HOA board against Elizabeth? She controls half the neighborhood." I nodded. "That's exactly why I need to do it. Beat her at her own game. If I'm on the board, I have access to financial records, meeting minutes, and vendor contracts. I can see what she's actually doing with HOA money." Mike stared at me. "You think she's stealing?" I thought about the forged deed, the fake invoices, the anonymous inspector complaint, and the threat against Sophia. "I think someone who goes this far to keep control is hiding something big," I said, "and I'm going to find out what it is." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. "Check your mail tomorrow. You're going to need it. A friend." I showed Mike. He read it twice. "Who else knows what she's doing?" he asked. I shook my head. Someone inside. Someone close to her. I stared at the phone. Tomorrow's mail could change everything. Someone was watching Elizabeth. Someone who wanted me to catch her. But why wouldn't they reveal themselves? What were they afraid of? Over the next 2 weeks, I watched the social pressure campaign escalate in ways that would have been almost impressive if it weren't so malicious. A petition started circulating titled Concerned Neighbors for Community Standards, with 18 signatures from people who lived on my street. I recognized maybe 3 of the names. The petition didn't mention me specifically, but it called for increased accountability for residents with documented disputes with HOA leadership. Flyers appeared on car windshields throughout the neighborhood. Generic-looking things with clip art of houses and text about, "Does your neighbor follow the rules? Your property value depends on it." Someone even posted fake reviews for my old contracting business, which I'd retired from 5 years ago, claiming I'd done shoddy work and refused to honor warranties. None of it was true, but once it's online, truth doesn't matter as much as volume. Then Mike spread an old map across his kitchen table, one he had found in the county records office dated from 1982. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the lake. Pine Ridge Lake was marked with a dotted line around its perimeter indicating it was a separate parcel from the residential lots. Mike had done some digging. Pine Ridge Holdings was the original development company that had planned the neighborhood back in the early 80s. They'd built the first 20 cabins, established the HOA, and maintained the lake. But in 1989, the company went bankrupt in the middle of a recession and dissolved. The lake parcel had never been formally transferred to the HOA. "It's been an orphan property for 36 years, Mike said. The HOA's been maintaining it. Everyone assumed we owned it, but legally, nobody owns it. I needed to confirm this with someone who had been there from the beginning. So, I drove to Evelyn Hayes' house. She was 83, one of the original residents, and she remembered everything. We sat on her porch drinking iced tea while she told me about the old days. Pine Ridge Holdings went bankrupt in late '89, she said. Terrible time. Half the lots hadn't sold yet. The developer just vanished, and we were left with this half-finished neighborhood. The HOA took over maintenance of the lake because someone had to, and after a few years, everyone just forgot the lake wasn't technically ours. The paperwork sat in the county office, and nobody ever followed up. I asked her if she'd be willing to sign an affidavit confirming this, and she agreed immediately. If Elizabeth's been telling people the HOA owns that lake, she's been lying, Evelyn said. And if someone's planning to develop it, they're buying property that isn't hers to sell. Susan's resignation came through official channels a week later. She announced it at a board meeting, citing health reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. But when I ran into her at the grocery store afterward, she was brutally honest. "I'm resigning strategically," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening. Someone needs to challenge Elizabeth from inside the board, and the only way that happens is if there's an open seat. The bylaws require an election within 10 days of a resignation. She pulled a nomination form from her purse, already filled out with my name, and handed it to me. "I watched her bully people for 3 years, Susan said. Someone needs to try." I took the form, thanked her, and filed it with the HOA that afternoon. The election was scheduled for the following Thursday. I campaigned the old-fashioned way, knocking on doors, talking to neighbors. A porch light blinked on, and a woman whispered, "About time someone asked." And a man in a ball cap folded his arms and showed me a dues chart on his phone, the line climbing like a ski slope. A kid handed me a juice box while his dad said, "Transparency. If you'll fight for that, you've got my vote." Some faces softened when I mentioned audits. Others hardened the second I said Elizabeth's name. By dusk, my knuckles were raw, and the list was split right down the middle. Half curious, half already sold on our version of order. On Wednesday, I ducked into the HOA office, a glorified storage closet behind the community center, to file candidate forms. That's when I noticed the old metal cabinet in the corner with a dime-sized lock and a drawer that didn't sit quite flush. The odd brass key I'd found in my boxes turned like it belonged there. Inside were weighted manila folders stamped PRC invoices. My stomach dropped. Same initials as the USB. I took photos fast. Over $50,000 paid in the last 2 years for administrative consulting, property management services, and community enhancement, all signed off by Elizabeth. None of it ever presented in a budget meeting. The election was held on Thursday evening at the community center. 75 residents showed up, which was actually a decent turnout for a board seat election. Elizabeth wasn't running, obviously. She was already president, but she'd endorsed Diane Fletcher, the longtime vice president, who gave a speech about experience, stability, and proven leadership. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I'm running on two principles, I said: transparency and accountability. If elected, my first motion will be to commission an independent financial audit of all HOA accounts and expenditures. My second motion will be to formally verify the HOA's ownership claim to Pine Ridge Lake, because I found evidence suggesting we may not actually own it. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Elizabeth's face went carefully neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. Voting was done by secret ballot. Paper slips dropped into a box. Susan, still technically secretary until the end of the month, was responsible for counting. She stood at the front of the room and pulled out ballots one by one, reading the names aloud. Diane Fletcher, John Harlan, Diane Fletcher, John Harlan. It went on for 10 minutes. The tally on the whiteboard kept climbing. Diane was ahead, 47 votes to 44. My stomach sank. I'd lost. Susan reached the bottom of the box, read the last ballot, and started to close it. Then she paused. "Wait," she said. "There's an envelope. Absentee ballots." She opened it, pulled out 6 ballots, and started counting again. Diane Fletcher, John Harlan, Diane Fletcher, John Harlan, Diane Fletcher. We were tied, 48 each. One ballot left. Susan unfolded it, and I swear the room held its breath. John Harlan. Final tally. John Harlan, 49. Diane Fletcher, 48. I'd won by a single vote. Elizabeth's face went from neutral to stone. Diane looked genuinely shocked. I thanked everyone who'd voted, shook Diane's hand, and tried not to let my relief show too much. As people were filing out, Robert Klein, the treasurer, pulled me aside. We'd never really spoken before. He was one of those quiet board members who mostly voted however Elizabeth wanted. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Victor Lang, Elizabeth's lawyer. He bought my cabin last year, paid me $340,000, which was fair market value. I saw it listed for sale last month for $120,000. He flipped it, made $80,000 profit in under a year." I didn't understand why he was telling me this. "So, he's a real estate investor," I said. Robert shook his head. "So, he's connected to property transactions in this neighborhood, and he's Elizabeth's personal attorney, and they're very friendly. When you make your motion about the lake ownership, I'm voting with you. I want to know what they're planning." The first official board meeting with me as a member was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 5 of us sat around a table in that same community center room. Elizabeth presiding, Diane as vice president, Robert as treasurer, Susan finishing her last meeting as secretary, and me. I didn't waste time. I moved that the board commission a comprehensive review of Pine Ridge Lake's ownership status, including a title search and verification of all historical transfer documents. Robert immediately said, "I second the motion." Elizabeth's face barely moved, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes. "All in favor," Susan said. "Aye," Robert said. I said. That was 3 votes out of 5. The motion passed. Elizabeth had just lost control of her own board. "We'll need to hire a title company," Elizabeth said evenly. "That will take time and money." I smiled. "Then we should start immediately." After the meeting, I headed for my truck, expecting the usual flyer under the wiper. Instead, there was a narrow white slip, no envelope, no handwriting, just a printed notice from the county records portal. "A document has been anonymously shared to your case folder." It felt colder than a note. Cleaner. Whoever sent it knew how to leave no fingerprints. Back home, I opened the link. Calendar snapshots lined up month after month, with Victor's initials penciled in the margins. Meeting notes that read like minutes without names, and at the bottom, a single line in looping hand. "Thursday, 2 p.m., Rosewood Cafe. Bring your camera. Inside access, not rumor." Someone in the circle wanted this caught in daylight and parked where lawyers look first. The next morning, I received an email from someone named Director Thompson at the Evergreen Conservation Trust, a nonprofit that specialized in preserving undeveloped land and waterways. "Mr. Harlan, The email read, "We've been contacted by a community member regarding the ownership status of Pine Ridge Lake. Our preliminary research confirms your findings. The lake parcel has been an orphan property since 1989. We would be interested in acquiring it for permanent conservation, but we need to demonstrate community support. If you can gather 30 signatures from Pine Ridge residents endorsing the transfer, we can petition the state to assign ownership to our trust and prevent any future development." I read it twice, then forwarded it to Mike. "This is it," I said when he called. "If we can get 30 signatures, the lake gets protected forever. Whatever Elizabeth and Victor are planning, it dies." I spent the next week going door to door with a petition. It was harder than the election. Some people signed immediately, saying they loved the lake and wanted it protected. Others were suspicious, asking why I was stirring up trouble, saying the lake had been fine for 40 years and didn't need outside organizations getting involved. A few slammed doors in my face, but I kept going, and slowly, the signatures added up. 20, 25, 30. I didn't stop there. I wanted a buffer in case anyone tried to challenge the validity of the signatures. By the end of the week, I had 35. At house number 12, Mrs. Ortega read every line on the petition, lips moving like she was tasting the words. Then she tapped the signature line. "I'm not saving a view," she said. "I'm saving my grandson's frog hunts." She signed slowly, careful letters that looked like a promise to water and reeds in summer. A few doors later, a man with paint on his hands said, "I don't like outsiders." I told him the trust would keep the lake from being parceled and paved. He stared past me at the tree lean and said, "Then maybe outsider is the wrong word," and signed too. Then something strange started happening. Professional-looking flyers appeared overnight on community bulletin boards and telephone poles advocating for the lake transfer to the Environmental Trust. They were better designed than anything I could have made, with color photos of the lake and statistics about protected waterways. I hadn't made them. Someone else was helping the campaign, and they were staying anonymous. On Tuesday evening, I found a large manila envelope that had been slid under my front door. No postage, no return address, just my name written on the front. Inside were printed emails between Elizabeth and Victor spanning the last 6 months, meeting schedules, property appraisals, communications with a development company called Northridge Construction, copies of Pine Ridge consulting invoices that matched the ones I'd photographed from the filing cabinet, except these had handwritten notes in the margins, Elizabeth's handwriting, noting which expenditures were actually for personal reimbursement. And at the bottom of the stack, a handwritten note on plain white paper. MC, use this Thursday. I called Mike immediately. MC, I said. Susan. Susan is the one who's been helping me. Mike was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? She resigned. She's out of the loop now. I looked at the note again. She was secretary for 3 years. She had access to everything. She saw what Elizabeth was doing, and she documented it. She's been feeding me information this whole time. Thursday morning, Victor intercepted me in the courthouse corridor. The kind of place where sound carries and everyone pretends it doesn't. Another word like fraud in public, and you'll be bankrupt by Christmas, he said, voice low and polished as if offering investment advice. His cufflink winked each time he folded his arms. A little metronome trying to set my pulse. I didn't bite. I let the bailiff's footsteps click past us and the smell of paper and coffee do the talking. Reality, he added almost pleasantly. My attorney will be in touch. He stepped aside with a lawyer's half-smile and walked away, the rhythm of his shoes fading down the marble like a clock running out on someone else. I stood there until the hallway emptied, then wrote his threat down word for word. Paper forgets less than people do. The next day, Reynolds called. Victor Lang and Elizabeth Grant filed a joint defamation lawsuit against you. They're claiming your statements about the forged deed, the lake ownership, and alleged financial impropriety have damaged their reputations and business relationships. They're seeking $50,000 in damages. I felt sick. Can they win? Reynolds sighed. It's a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to intimidate you into silence by burying you in legal fees. I'll file a motion to dismiss under the anti-slap statute. You'll probably win eventually, but it'll take months, and cost you more money. That's the point. They want you to give up. I thanked Reynolds and hung up. I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not when I was this close. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the red USB drive, staring at the password prompt for the 100th time. Password. I tried everything I could think of. Dates, names, places. Nothing worked. I was down to 2 attempts remaining before it locked forever. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Go simpler. What did the boxes say exactly? The text ended with 2 slanted dashes, like someone trying to sketch quotation marks with a pencil. Susan's tiny tell. I stared at the red USB drive and replayed the first night on the porch. The neat labels Elizabeth had taped to my life. Removed per bylaw 14.2. Mike leaned in. Tried exactly, periods and all. I typed it slowly, letter by letter, the periods like stepping stones, and hit enter. The screen went black for 3 long seconds. Then, access granted. Folders bloomed. Audio recordings, PRC financials, email correspondence, photocopy evidence, and a file named README sitting on top like a hand on my shoulder, saying start here. I opened the README file first. It was dated 3 months ago. If you're reading this, it said, Elizabeth tried something. I've been documenting everything since April 2022 after I discovered she was preparing to frame me for embezzlement. She threatened my job references if I ever betrayed her, so I stayed quiet and recorded everything instead. There's enough evidence here to destroy her. Use it for everyone she's hurt. Signed, Susan. I read it twice, my hands shaking. 3 years. Susan had been documenting Elizabeth for 3 years, completely alone, knowing that if she was caught, her career was over. Mike read it over my shoulder and whispered, "Holy hell." I opened the PRC financials folder. Bank statements showed Pine Ridge Consulting had received $178,000 from the HOA over 5 years. Withdrawals from the PRC account went to grocery stores, hair salons, car payments, and personal credit cards. All of it was personal expenses routed through a fake company to make it look like legitimate business costs. I opened the first audio file. It was dated 6 months ago. Elizabeth's voice came through clearly. Victor, I can guarantee the board vote. 15% of gross, $340,000 commission. Victor responded, that's the projection. Elizabeth again. If anyone audits. Victor, no one's auditing. You control the books. Elizabeth laughed. Exactly. I stopped the playback and looked at Mike. This is it, I said. Her own voice. She can't deny this. There were 23 files, 3 years of recorded phone calls, in-person meetings, and casual conversations where Elizabeth incriminated herself over and over again. I didn't need to listen to all of them right now. I just needed to know they existed. I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a long time. 23 recordings, 3 years of evidence. Susan had documented everything while Elizabeth threatened her job, her references, her entire livelihood. Tomorrow's board meeting was going to have 150 people in attendance. It was being live-streamed for residents who couldn't make it in person. I had the power to destroy Elizabeth completely in front of everyone, on camera, for half the town to watch. Mike broke the silence. You okay? I shook my head. I'm about to ruin someone's life publicly for hundreds of people to see. Mike leaned forward. I nodded. I know. That's what scares me. I know she deserves this. But when I hit play on those recordings tomorrow in front of everyone, there's no taking it back. It's not justice. It's destruction. I opened the laptop again, clicked on another audio file at random, and listened. Elizabeth and Victor discussing how to phrase the development proposal to minimize community opposition, calculating profit margins, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate board votes. I listened to the whole thing, sitting alone in the dark, and made my decision. Tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. The community center was packed by 7:15 p.m. 150 residents filled every chair and lined the walls. Someone had set up a camera on a tripod to live stream the meeting, and I could see the viewer count in the corner of my phone. 89 people were watching remotely. Elizabeth sat at the head table looking confident, like this was just another routine board meeting where she'd maintain control through procedure and parliamentary rules. I loaded my presentation onto the laptop connected to the projector, tested the audio output to make sure it would play through the room speakers, and tried to keep my hands from shaking. Reynolds leaned over and whispered, "Judge dismissed their lawsuit this morning. Called it frivolous and a textbook slap. You're clear." I exhaled. One less thing to worry about. Elizabeth called the meeting to order at 7:30, went through standard procedural announcements, and then opened the floor for new business. I raised my hand. I'd like to present findings on the lake ownership research the board commissioned 2 weeks ago. Elizabeth nodded stiffly. I stood up, walked to the front, and advanced to my first slide. "Many of you have heard I've been researching Pine Ridge Lake's legal status," I said. "I'm here to confirm what I found. Pine Ridge Lake has been an orphan property since 1989 when the original development company went bankrupt. The HOA has maintained the lake for 36 years, but we never actually owned it. The title was never transferred." I showed one slide with a scanned copy of the 1982 map and the county records showing Pine Ridge Holdings dissolution. This matters because if anyone's been making plans based on the assumption that the HOA owns the lake and can sell it or develop it, those plans are built on a false premise. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. The livestream viewer count climbed to 167. I advanced to the next slide. "But there's more than just the lake," I said. "Someone in this community has been documenting financial irregularities and potential fraud for 3 years. They gave me evidence, and I think everyone deserves to hear it." Elizabeth's face went from confident to confused. "John, what are you talking about?" I didn't answer her directly. I just clicked play on the first audio file. Elizabeth's voice filled the room through the speakers. "Victor, board vote secured. 15% of gross, $340,000. Victor Lang's voice, that's the projection. Elizabeth, if anyone audits. Victor, no one's auditing. You control the books." Elizabeth laughing, "Exactly." The room erupted, people shouting questions, half of them on their feet. Diane Fletcher stood up, her face pale. "Elizabeth, is that you? Is that real?" Elizabeth stared at the speaker, as if it had betrayed her. Where did you get that?" I played the second audio file. This one was shorter. Just Elizabeth alone in what sounded like her office. Laura Mitchell. Laura Mitchell. The sound of a pen scratching on paper. Over and over. I stopped the playback. "She recorded herself practicing the forged signature," I said. "That's the deed she used to try to steal my cabin." The room gasped collectively. Someone in the back shouted, "This is insane." I played a third audio file dated September, just days before she'd locked me out of my cabin. Elizabeth's voice. "Deed is ready. Seal looks perfect. Serve it on Monday. Victor, and if he fights." Elizabeth, "By the time he gets a lawyer, I'll have possession. Delay long enough for the November vote." I stopped the playback again. "She planned everything," I said. "Every step." The livestream viewer count hit 351. I looked around the room at people's faces, shock, anger. Some were crying. Others looked numb, like they couldn't process what they were hearing. I advanced to the next slide, showing bank statements from Pine Ridge Consulting. Over the last 5 years, the HOA paid a company called Pine Ridge Consulting $178,000 for various services. None of these services was announced to the community. None of these expenditures were detailed in the annual budget reports. And if you look at where the money went after it reached the account, you'll see withdrawals for groceries, hair salons, car payments, and personal credit cards. It was embezzlement routed through a shell company to make it look legitimate. Diane Fletcher was staring at Elizabeth like she'd never seen her before. "Elizabeth, tell me this isn't true," she said. Elizabeth didn't respond. She was looking at the screen, at the bank statements, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. Victor Lang stood up in the back row, where he had been sitting quietly. He grabbed his coat and started walking toward the exit. Elizabeth's head snapped toward him. "Victor, where are you going?" He didn't turn around. "I'm done," he said flatly. "My lawyers will contact you about breach of contract." He walked out, and the door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Elizabeth watched $340,000 walk out of her life and didn't move. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Then Susan stood up from her seat near the front. She'd been sitting quietly through the whole presentation, but now she walked forward, stood next to me, and faced Elizabeth directly. "It was me," Susan said. "I recorded everything." Elizabeth stared at her. "You?" Susan nodded. "You put my name on every fake invoice. You had a draft email saved on your computer blaming me for everything if anyone ever found out. June 20th, 2022. I saw it on your screen when I came into your office to drop off meeting minutes. That's when I started recording every phone call, every meeting. 3 years." She pulled a folded printout from her pocket, unfolded it, and read aloud. "All financial transactions processed and approved by Susan, acting secretary, per standard procedures. In the event of an audit or investigation, responsibility falls to the officer who signed off on expenditures, not to board leadership." Susan looked up. "That was your insurance policy. Throw me under the bus if anything went wrong." So, I made my own insurance policy. I documented everything. The room erupted again. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was betrayal, attempted framing, a plan to destroy someone's life to cover her own crimes. My phone rang. I pulled it out, saw it was Director Thompson from the Evergreen Conservation Trust. I answered on speaker and held the phone up so the whole room could hear. "Mr. Harlan," his voice came through clearly. "I'm calling to confirm that the state has approved our petition to acquire Pine Ridge Lake. We received overwhelming community support, and the State Environmental Board fast-tracked the transfer given the property's orphan status. Closing is scheduled for November 15th. The lake will be protected in perpetuity." I thanked him and hung up. Dead silence in the room. Everyone had heard. The lake was saved. Whatever development deal Elizabeth and Victor had been planning was dead. Diane Fletcher spoke into the silence. Elizabeth didn't respond. She was staring at nothing, her face completely blank. Then something shifted in her expression. Her hand started shaking. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You destroyed everything," she screamed at me. 6 years I've given this place. 6 years of work, of planning, of building something." Her voice was getting louder, more frantic. People in the front row were leaning back, genuinely alarmed. "I did this for the community, for property values, for standards." She pulled her phone out of her pocket with shaking hands and started dialing. "I'm calling the police. You can't do this to me." The room watched in stunned silence as Elizabeth held her phone to her ear. And we all heard the 911 operator answer. 911? "What's your emergency?" Elizabeth's voice cracked. "Yes, police. There's a man harassing me. He's accusing me of things. He's ruining everything. You need to come right now." The operator's voice, calm and professional, came through clearly. "Ma'am, what's your location?" Elizabeth gave the community center address. There was a beat of silence. Then Elizabeth screamed into the phone. "I'm the owner now. I'm the legal owner. It's mine. The lake, the community, all of it. It's mine." Another beat of silence. The whole room stared. The livestream viewer count was 461. Elizabeth was still shouting into the phone. "I control this place. I'm the owner. I'm the one who makes decisions. It's mine. Mine." Susan spoke quietly. "Elizabeth, 461 people are watching you right now on the live stream." Elizabeth's head turned slowly toward the camera, saw the red recording light, saw the viewer count displayed on the attached tablet. Her face went from rage to horror to something else entirely. Realization. She was still holding the phone, still connected to 911, still being recorded, but she couldn't stop. "I'm the owner," she said again, quieter now, almost to herself. "I control it. It's mine." Deputy Anderson, the same officer who had responded to my cabin 5 weeks ago, walked into the community center. He took in the scene with one long look. 150 people sitting in stunned silence. Elizabeth standing at the front table, still holding her phone, tears streaming down her face. "Ma'am," he said gently, "did you call 911? Elizabeth looked at him, looked at her phone, looked at the room full of people staring at her. "I, the owner, it's mine." Her words weren't making sense anymore. Deputy Anderson walked up to her slowly, like approaching someone on a ledge. "Ma'am, I need you to come outside with me. We're going to talk, okay?" He took her gently by the elbow and led her toward the door. She was still muttering, "Mine, the lake. I built this. Mine." The door closed behind them, and the room sat in absolute silence for 10 seconds. Then Reynolds stood up. "I move for the emergency removal of Elizabeth Grant from all board positions, effective immediately." Robert said, "I second." The vote was 4-0. Elizabeth was out. Reynolds continued, "I move that all evidence presented tonight be turned over to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Diane Fletcher said, "I second." Vote 4-0. The meeting adjourned at 9:23 p.m. The live stream had peaked at 531 viewers. I walked outside and found Sophia calling my phone. I answered. "Dad," she said, "it's everywhere. Every platform. The video. She's screaming that she's the owner. It's already got 200,000 views." I watched the clip on my phone. Comments scrolling faster than I could read them. Justice served. She deserved this. This is actually really sad to watch. I closed the phone. I'd gotten everything I wanted. My cabin back. The lake protected forever. Elizabeth exposed and removed. Justice. So why did I feel like this? Mike walked up beside me. "You okay?" I shook my head. "I don't know yet." By the next morning, the video had exploded. HOA President Epic Meltdown was trending across every platform with 1.2 million views and climbing. Clips of Elizabeth screaming, "I'm the owner now," were being shared, remixed, and turned into reaction content. The comments were split pretty evenly. Half the people celebrated it as justice, karma catching up with a corrupt official. The other half found it deeply uncomfortable watching a human being have a complete psychological breakdown on camera in front of hundreds of people. I fell somewhere in between. She'd tried to destroy me. She'd threatened my daughter. She'd stolen from the community for years. But seeing her fall apart like that, seeing her lose everything in the span of an hour while the internet watched and laughed, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. The district attorney filed criminal charges within 2 weeks. Embezzlement, forgery, fraud, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings alone were enough to convict. But Elizabeth's attorney negotiated a plea deal. 18 months probation, full restitution of $178,000 to the HOA, mandatory therapy, and community service. No jail time. Some people were angry about that, wanted to see her locked up, but honestly, I was relieved. I'd already watched her destroy herself publicly. I didn't need to watch the rest. The lake transfer to the Evergreen Conservation Trust went through on November 15th as scheduled. Director Thompson called to tell me they were naming it the Laura Harlan Memorial Lake after my late wife, in recognition of my efforts to protect it. I cried when he told me that. Sophia cried when I told her. It felt like the one purely good thing to come out of this entire mess. The HOA reformed itself completely over the next 6 months. Susan was elected president, Robert remained treasurer, and 3 new board members were brought in, all running on platforms of transparency and accountability. We implemented term limits, mandatory annual audits by independent firms, and public access to all financial records. Other HOAs in the region started reaching out, asking how we'd handled the situation, wanting to implement similar reforms. We became a case study in what happens when communities hold leadership accountable. It wasn't the reputation any of us wanted, but it was better than the alternative. I was hired by the Evergreen Conservation Trust as a community liaison for the lake. Part-time work that let me stay involved in its protection without taking over my life. Sophia visited more often, bringing her kids, my grandkids, to swim in the lake that now bore their grandmother's name. Life slowly returned to something like normal. 6 months after the meltdown, I was at the grocery store and saw Elizabeth in the produce section. She looked different. No makeup, jeans, and a plain shirt. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired, but somehow lighter, like a weight had been lifted. We made eye contact. For a second, I thought about just walking away, avoiding the awkwardness, but something made me walk over. "Elizabeth," I said. She nodded. "John." We stood there for an awkward moment. Then she said quietly, "I'm broke." Humiliated. The video plays everywhere I go. But the therapy is helping. I'm learning why I needed that control. Why I fell apart when I lost it. It's hard work. I nodded. That's good. Really? She looked at me with genuine confusion. Why are you being kind? I try to destroy you. I thought about that for a moment. That video, I said finally, I don't feel good about it. I wanted justice. What I got was a viral sensation. 500,000 people watched you break down. I wonder sometimes if there was a better way. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. The media made me a meme, but you're the first person in 6 months who's looked at me and seen a person. I didn't know what to say to that. Everyone's a person, I said finally, even when they do terrible things. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, maybe never would be. But it was acknowledgement. She was a person who had made terrible choices and was paying for them in ways that went beyond legal consequences. We said goodbye, went our separate ways in the grocery store, and I thought about what justice actually looks like when you get it, whether it's clean or messy or somewhere in between. 18 months after the meltdown, I was sitting on my porch with Sophia and my grandkids, watching them play by the water. Sophia said, "That video still gets views. You're internet famous, Dad." I laughed. I just wanted my cabin back. She nodded. You got more than that. The lake's protected forever. The HOA is reformed. Susan's doing great as president. And 500,000 people watch someone learn that actions have consequences. I thought about that. And 500,000 people watch someone have a complete breakdown. I showed those recordings in front of 150 people because I wanted justice. But when she started screaming on that 911 call, when she completely fell apart, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I was watching something I couldn't take back. Sophia was quiet for a moment. You think you went too far? I shook my head. I think I did what was necessary. But necessary doesn't always feel good. We sat in silence, listening to the water lap against the shore, the kids laughing as they tried to skip stones. My phone buzzed. Email from Elizabeth. Subject line, "Thank you." I opened it and read aloud for Sophia. Melissa and I had coffee yesterday. My daughter, first time in 5 years. We're taking it slow. She says she needs to see sustained change. Not just words, but we're talking. The video was my rock bottom. I needed it, even though I hated you for it. Thank you for the accountability I couldn't give myself. I closed the email. Sophia asked, "Do you believe her?" I thought about the woman I'd seen in the grocery store, tired and stripped of the armor she'd worn for years. "Yeah," I said. "I do." The sun was setting over Laura Harlan Memorial Lake, painting the water gold and orange. My grandkids were still playing, still laughing, still making memories in a place that would be protected forever. I thought about everything that had happened. The forged deed, the USB drive, the election, the recordings, the meltdown, the aftermath. I thought about Susan documenting for 3 years alone, waiting for the right moment. I thought about Elizabeth building her identity around control and falling apart when she lost it. I thought about justice and revenge and how sometimes they look almost identical until you're living in the aftermath of both. You know what I learned? I said to Sophia. Sophia nodded. And sometimes, she said, everyone comes out better eventually, even if it's messy. I watched my grandkids play in the water in the lake that bore their grandmother's name and thought, yeah, even if it's messy, even if it's complicated, even if viral videos and public breakdowns and 3 years of secret recordings aren't the way anyone wants justice to happen. Sometimes it's what's necessary. And sometimes, if you're lucky, everyone gets a chance at redemption. Even the people who don't deserve it. Maybe especially them. That's my story. That's how a woman who screamed, "I'm the owner now," lost everything she tried to steal. And that's why accountability matters, even when it's uncomfortable to watch. What do you think? Share your opinions in the comments below, especially about themes of violence and injustice in everyday life. Do you believe in public accountability like this? Or do you think there's a line where it becomes too much? Take a stand and let me know your views.